We've been hearing from quite a few of you about something that's, well, always on our minds these days, staying secure online, especially with email. It just feels like a constant battle.
It really does.
So today we wanted to really dig into a specific and pretty serious threat there, business email compromise. You might see it called BEC.
Right. And BEC, for anyone maybe not totally up to speed, it's basically this, sophisticated kind of fraud. Attackers get into a company's email.
Like hacking an account.
Exactly. They hack an account, then pretend to be someone important inside the company. Could be the CEO, maybe someone in finance, even a trusted supplier.
And the goal is to trick people.
Yeah, trick colleagues or partners into sending money where it shouldn't go, or maybe giving up sensitive data. It's all about abusing that trust, that authority.
And we're not talking small change here, are we? The financial hit can be, well, massive.
Oh, absolutely huge. I mean, think about this. Back in 2020, BEC was actually the single biggest reason for financial losses from cyber attacks.
Biggest, wow.
Yeah. And the FBI's Internet Crime Complaints Center, the IC3, they got almost 24,000 BEC complaints just in 2019. The total losses from those, over $1.7 billion.
1.7 billion just from email scams in 1 year. That's
Yeah.
staggering.
It really puts it in perspective, doesn't it? It shows you just how much money is involved for these criminals and the kind of damage they can do.
And it's not like this problem is shrinking.
No way. It's actually growing. The whole market for email security is already pretty big, like almost $4 billion back in 2022, and growing steadily.
Okay.
But the specific part of the market focused just on fighting BEC, that's growing even faster. We're talking over 20% growth per year.
Which I guess makes sense when you hear about the explosion in phishing emails.
Exactly. Malicious phishing emails went up something like 569% in 2022, just an unbelievable jump.
569%. It sounds almost impossible to keep up with using the old methods.
It really is, like trying to catch smoke.
Yeah.
And that's why we wanted to focus this deep dive on one company in particular, Abnormal Security.
Abnormal security. Okay. So what's
Yeah.
their angle?
Well, their mission is pretty clear. Help businesses fend off these modern email threats. That includes, the usual phishing and malware, but also those really sneaky account takeovers.
And how do they do it? Is it just better filters?
It's a bit different. They built their system in the cloud from the ground up, using what's called an API-based approach.
APIs, those are like the connectors between different software, right?
Precisely.
Yeah.
Lets things talk to each other. And the really key part is their use of AI, artificial intelligence. They use it to spot weird patterns, behavioral anomalies, stuff that those traditional rule-based filters often just miss completely.
Interesting. So behavioral AI looking for things that are abnormal, hence the name, I guess.
You got it.
Okay, so for everyone listening, especially those who've told us email security is a major concern, our goal here is to unpack how abnormal security is trying to solve this really expensive problem. We want to understand their tech, what makes them stand out in, let's face it, a very crowded cybersecurity market.
Sounds good. And maybe the best place to start is, well, the beginning. How did Abnormal Security come about?
Right, the origin story.
It was founded back in 2018. The founders are Evan Reiser, who's the CEO, and Sanjay Jaykumar, the CTO.
And Reiser, he's been around the block a bit in the startup world, hasn't he?
Oh, yeah. Definitely a serial founder. He started BloomSpot before this that was about connecting online ads to offline sales using behavioral data. JP Morgan actually bought them.
Okay.
Then he founded AdStack. That used machine learning for ad tech. Telepart acquired them. And then Telepart itself got bought by Twitter.
So a strong background in machine learning and data.
Absolutely. And after his time at Twitter, Reiser apparently missed that startup energy, the speed, the culture.
I can imagine. Big companies move differently.
Right. So he teamed up with Jay Kumar, who had been a key engineering lead with him at Telepart. They shared this idea about what they could build next.
And they didn't just, start coding right away.
No, and this is actually really interesting. They took a step back. They connected with Ashim Chanda at Greylock. He's a big name in venture capital, especially enterprise tech.
Okay, Greylock, big VC firm.
Yeah. And that connection led to some serious research. They went out and had something like over 50 meetings with CIOs and CISOs at Fortune 500 companies.
50 meetings with top tech and security execs. That's a lot of conversations.
It is. But it paid off. They kept hearing the same thing over and over again.
Which was?
This deep anxiety about losing money because of these socially engineered email attacks, the BEC stuff we were just talking about.
The impersonation scams.
Exactly. And the feeling back then among these leaders was that the security built into the big cloud email platforms like Microsoft 365 or Google Workspace just wasn't cutting it for this specific kind of targeted attack. There was a gap.
Okay, so they identified a real costly pain point that existing solutions weren't fully addressed.
Precisely. And then you bring in Reiser and Jay Kumar's background. They'd seen machine learning work incredibly well for targeted advertising at Telepart and Twitter.
Right, understanding user behavior.
Yeah. So the light bulb moment was kind of like, hey, why can't we use this same kind of sophisticated ML tech to spot and stop these really targeted email attacks? And that idea, that core concept, was the seed for abnormal security.
Makes perfect sense, applying that behavioral analysis know-how to security.
Exactly. And so their main product, the heart of what they offer, is their inbound email security solution.
Okay, protecting emails coming into an organization.
Right. And they're very clear about the size of the problem they're solving. They often cite that average BEC costs around $125,000 per incident.
Ouch. Per incident.
Yeah. And they also mention stats like 89% of companies getting hit with supply chain compromise attempts every week.
Every week. That's relentless.
It is. And then there's the time it takes to sort things out. On average, it takes companies over 300 days just to identify that they've been breached and then contain the damage.
Over 300 days. That's like 10 months.
Yeah.
An eternity in the cyber world.
Absolutely. So Abnormal's answer is this behavioral AI we mentioned. They say it's built to catch never-before-seen attacks.
How does that work exactly if it's never been seen before?
Well, instead of just looking for known bad stuff like a specific malicious link or a known virus signature, which are traditional indicators of compromise or IOCs.
Right, the known bad lists.
Yeah. Their AI looks at, get this, tens of thousands of unique signals within the email, the sender, the context, the relationships, looking for anomalies, things that deviate from the norm for that specific user or organization.
So it learns what normal looks like first.
Exactly. It builds a baseline. So if your CEO almost never emails the finance team directly about urgent wire transfers, but suddenly one comes through with slightly unusual phrasing late on a Friday.
The AI flags that as suspicious, even if there's no obvious malware.
Precisely. It's looking for those subtle deviations. And crucially, when it spots something it thinks is malicious, it doesn't just like put a warning banner on it.
What does it do?
It has automatic remediation. It pulls the malicious message right out of the user's inbox. Gone. The end user never even sees it, never gets a chance to click or reply.
So it stops the threat before interaction. That seems key.
Definitely. And they also provide something called the threat log for the security administrators. It's a dashboard where they can see all the threats that were caught, analyze trends, and understand what kinds of attacks are hitting them.
Okay, that makes sense for the security team. Now, you mentioned APIs and integration earlier. It sounds like the platform doesn't just live in isolation.
No, integration is really central to how it works. Those APIs connected deeply into the main cloud email systems. Think Microsoft 365, Google Workspace.
Okay.
But it also integrates with cloud collaboration tools, Slack, Teams, things like that, and identity systems like Okta.
For user logins.
Right. And even endpoint security like CrowdStrike, which protects the actual computers and devices. This network of integrations allows the platform to pull in a huge amount of context.
And that context must feed the AI, right? Give it more data points to establish what's normal or abnormal.
Exactly. It's not just analyzing the email. It's analyzing the email within the broader context of the user's identity, their other activities, the applications they use.
That sounds powerful. They had a customer quote, didn't they? Someone from EAB.
Yeah, Brian Markham at EAB. He mentioned how easy the integration was and how quickly they saw the value. Said something like, after just 2 weeks of abnormal collecting data, their CFO immediately got why it was important.
That's pretty strong validation, seeing the value that fast.
It really is. And based on all this data they collect, Abnormal builds out what they call their knowledge bases.
Knowledge bases, like internal encyclopedias.
Kind of. They have 4 main ones. There's people-based that builds detailed profiles of all the users, learning their communication habits, roles, relationship.
Okay, understanding the people.
Then vendor-based does the same thing, but for all the external companies they email with. It even gives vendors a risk score based on past interactions and potential impersonation risk.
That's smart. Vendor email compromise is a big part of BEC.
Huge. Then there's app-based. That keeps track of all the third-party apps connected to the email environment, like what permissions do they have? Could they be risky?
The app ecosystem, often overlooked.
Right. And finally, tenant-based. That monitors the overall configuration of the email system itself, policy changes, access rules, stuff that could accidentally open up security holes.
Yeah, okay. So it's looking at people, vendors, apps, and the system configuration, that's pretty comprehensive.
It's definitely a layered approach, trying to get visibility into all potential entry points and risks.
So we've talked about stopping bad emails coming in. Does the platform help security teams in other ways, like after an alert happens?
Yeah, it definitely aims to support the security operations teams beyond just blocking. That threat log we mentioned gives them the details needed for investigations.
Right.
And those API integrations mean they can pipe Abnormal's findings into their other security tools, their SIEM, their SOAR platforms, for a unified view and response workflow.
Okay, so it plays nice with the rest of the security stack.
It's designed to.
Mm.
And they have some specific add-on modules, too, addressing common headaches for security teams.
Like what?
Well, think about all those emails employees report as suspicious using the report fish button.
Oh, yeah, that must create a lot of noise for the security team.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Abnormal says something like 90% of those user-reported emails turn out to be safe or just spam. It takes a lot of manual effort to triage them all.
I bet.
So they offer abuse mailbox automation.
Mm.
The idea is their system automatically analyzes those reported emails. It categorizes them malicious, spam, safe.
Okay, automated triage.
Right. And if it finds one that is malicious, it can then automatically search for and remove other identical emails from that same campaign that maybe weren't reported yet.
Oh, that's clever. Proactive cleanup.
Yeah. And it can automatically notify the employee who recorded it, closing the loop. The goal is to massively reduce that manual workload.
That sounds like a huge time saver for stretched security teams. What else?
Another big one is email account takeover protection.
Account takeovers. Yeah, those are nasty. When a bad guy actually gets control of a real user's mailbox.
Super damaging. Abnormal quotes figures like the average cost of a breach from an account takeover is millions, and millions of credentials get stolen every year. It's a huge problem.
So how do they protect against that?
Again, it comes back to behavior. They baseline what's normal for each user, where do they usually log in from, what devices, what multi-factor authentication methods do they use.
Building that normal profile again.
Exactly. Then, if they see a weird deviation like a login from a completely different country, or someone suddenly trying to change MFA settings, it triggers an alert.
Okay, spots the anomaly.
And it doesn't just alert. It can automatically create a case file for the security team and can even take immediate action like forcing a password reset for that user or blocking the suspicious login attempt or ending active sessions.
Proactive defense again. Trying to lock down the account before major damage is done.
That's the idea. Stop the bleeding quickly.
Okay, that makes sense for core security. What about those other features they mentioned? Something about productivity.
Right, email productivity. This one might seem a bit different, but it tackles that problem of inbox clutter from gray mail.
Gray mail? What's that exactly?
It's all that stuff you technically signed up for, but don't really want cluttering your main inbox. Think newsletters you never read, marketing promos, social media notifications.
Ah, okay. The stuff that isn't spam, but isn't urgent work email either?
Exactly. Abnormal estimates that sorting through all that costs employees serious time, maybe days per year, and execs get way more of it.
So how do they help with that?
Their system uses its analysis to identify this gray mail and automatically shunt it off to a separate promotions folder, kind of like how Gmail does, but learning individual preferences over time.
So it cleans up the main inbox.
Yeah. And they give users dashboards showing how much gray mail they get and from who, so they can maybe unsubscribe more easily. It's about reducing distractions and saving time.
Interesting. Kind of a quality of life improvement alongside the security.
You can see it that way. And then there's email security posture management.
Posture management. Sounds like checking the settings.
Pretty much. It's about finding and fixing potential weaknesses in how the actual cloud email system itself is configured. Sometimes attackers don't need fancy exploits. They just find a misconfiguration.
Like an admin forgot to lock down a setting.
Or maybe a third-party app was given way too many permissions. These things can be hard to track manually. Abnormal uses its behavioral baselines and monitoring to spot risky changes in permissions or policies.
So it's auditing the setup continuously.
Essentially, yeah, automating those security checks that are often tedious and easy to miss.
Okay, so it's inbound protection, account takeover, abuse mailbox help, gray mail filtering, and posture management. That's a pretty wide scope just around email.
It is, and they're even extending it beyond just email now.
Yeah. Where else?
They have what they call email-like add-ons, basically taking the same AI and applying it to other collaboration platforms.
Like Slack and Teams.
Exactly. Slack, Teams, Zoom. They scan for malicious links or content shared in those chats, just like they do in email.
Makes sense. People share links everywhere now.
Right. They also extend the account takeover protection, correlating suspicious activity across email and these other apps. And they do security posture management for them too, watching for risky permission changes in Slack or Teams.
So a unified view of risk across email and collaboration tools.
That seems to be the goal. A more holistic approach, recognizing that threats can cross between these platforms.
Okay, that's a lot of capability. Who's actually buying this? You mentioned Fortune 500 companies earlier.
Yeah, their sweet spot definitely seems to be larger enterprises. They list some really big names as customers. Maersk, the shipping giant, ADT for security, Choice Hotels, Xerox, big universities like Kentucky, Mattel, Domino's,
Okay, yeah, recognizable names across different industries.
Avery Dennison, Foot Locker, Liberty Mutual, AAA, the list goes on. They say they have more than 12% of the Fortune 500 and over 5% of the Fortune 1000.
That's significant market penetration in the enterprise space.
It definitely shows they're resonating with those larger organizations that face these kinds of complex threats.
And we talked about the market size for BEC solutions growing rapidly, billions of dollars.
Yeah, the overall problem isn't going away. One report estimated BEC caused something like $51 billion in losses worldwide between 2013 and 2023, and the market for solutions is projected to hit over $4 billion by 2030. So, big problem, big market.
Which means they probably have some serious competition, right? Who are the other main players they're going up against?
For sure. The main competitors that usually come up are companies like Proofpoint, Avanan, and Mimecast.
Okay, let's touch on this. Proofpoint is a huge name in email security, right? Been around forever.
Definitely. They're often called the 800-pound gorilla in this space. Massive customer base, crossed $1 billion in revenue years ago, got acquired by Thoma Bravo for over $12 billion. They're a major force.
So, tough competition. How does Abnormal stack up?
Well, it's interesting. When you look at reviews on platforms like Gartner Peer Insights, where actual customers rate the product,
Yeah.
reviewers actually rated Abnormal higher than Proofpoint in some key areas. Things like service and support, how easy it was to integrate and deploy, and even the evaluation and contracting process.
Huh. So maybe perceived as more nimble or customer-focused, despite Proofpoint's size.
That could be the implication, yeah.
Yeah.
Better customer experience scores in those specific areas.
Okay. What about Avanan? You mentioned they also use AI.
Right. Avanan promotes their AI approach heavily, too. Similar to Abnormal, they claim really high effectiveness against phishing, like 99.2% reduction.
Impressive number.
And they also highlight protecting other cloud apps like OneDrive and SharePoint. Checkpoint, another big security vendor, acquired Avanan a few years back for around $300 million.
And how do they compare on those customer reviews?
Similar story in one key area. Gartner reviewers rated Abnormal higher than Avanan, specifically on service and support.
Service and support seems to be a recurring theme where Abnormal scores well.
It appears so. And the third main one mentioned was Mimecast.
Another established player, right? Broad email security offerings.
Yeah, Mimecast is also very well known, large customer base, wide range of features. But again, looking at those Gartner peer reviews,
Let me guess.
Abnormal came out ahead. Reviewers rated Abnormal higher than Mimecast across the board. Service, support, integration, deployment, evaluation, contracting, pretty much everything.
Wow. Okay, so while Proofpoint, Avanan, and Mimecast are big established competitors, Abnormal seems to be consistently getting high marks from customers for the overall experience and support on top of their tech.
That seems to be a key part of their competitive positioning based on that feedback.
Interesting. Okay, let's shift to the business itself. How do they make money? What's their model?
It's typically a subscription model, priced per user per year. That's pretty standard for this kind of software as a service. The exact price probably varies, but back in 2021, it was reportedly starting around $35 per user per year.
Okay, and how are they doing as a business? You mentioned market penetration.
They seem to be doing very well. They hit a major milestone recently, surpassing $100 million in annual recurring revenue, or ARR.
$100 million ARR is a big deal for a SaaS company.
Huge benchmark. They've also landed on those prestigious lists like Forbes Cloud 100 and AI 50. And maybe most importantly, their customer renewal rate was reportedly around 99% back in mid-2022.
99% renewal, that's incredibly high, means customers are sticking around.
Extremely high. Shows very strong customer satisfaction and retention.
And they've raised a lot of money too, right? That valuation was pretty eye-popping.
Yeah, that Series C funding round back in May 2022 brought in $210 million, and it put their valuation at a whopping $4 billion. Total funding is around $284 million now.
$4 billion valuation. Investors clearly see a massive opportunity there.
Definitely signals strong belief in their growth potential and their approach to the market.
So they've got the tech, the customers seem happy, they've got the funding. What are the big opportunities ahead for Abnormal? Where do they go from here?
Well, one huge area is definitely generative AI.
Like ChatGPT and those kinds of tools, how does that play in?
It cuts both ways, really. Abnormal put out a report recently based on surveying security leaders, and something like 98% of them are worried about the risks coming from these AI tools.
We're worried that attackers will use AI to make better scams.
Exactly. More convincing phishing emails, more sophisticated social engineering done at massive scale. Over 80% said they'd already seen or suspected attacks using AI.
That's scary. The barrier to entry for creating convincing attacks could get much lower.
It could, but the flip side is that same report showed security leaders also see the value of using AI for defense. Around 92% saw AI as valuable for protection.
Fighting fire with fire.
Pretty much. Abnormal CEO Evan Reiser has been vocal about this. He basically says you need AI-centric email security now to handle these new AI-powered attacks. So leaning into AI for defense is a massive opportunity for them.
Makes sense. Any other big opportunities?
Well, just the general trend of security budgets increasing probably helps too. As threats get worse, companies tend to spend more on protection, creating a favorable market.
Right, a rising tide lifts all boats, potentially. Now, what about the flip side? Any major risks or challenges they need to watch out for?
One potential challenge, and it's common in security, is the risk of alert fatigue.
Alert fatigue, meaning too many warnings.
Yeah. If your detection system is really good and sophisticated, like Abnormal's aims to be, it might flag a lot of potential issues. Even if they're legitimate alerts, if security teams get bombarded constantly.
They might start tuning them out or miss the really critical one in all the noise.
Exactly. It can overwhelm the analysts. One customer comment actually mentioned how important it was for a tool like Abnormal to help reduce alert fatigue, not add to it.
So it's a balancing act, finding the real threats without drowning the humans in alerts.
Precisely. They need to make sure their alerts are not just accurate, but also well prioritized and actionable, so security teams can focus on what truly matters. Managing that signal-to-noise ratio is crucial.
That makes a lot of sense. A tool is only useful if people can actually use it effectively. Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the main takeaway here? If you had to boil down Abnormal security.
I'd say it's fundamentally an AI-driven, API-integrated platform designed to tackle that really costly and evolving threat of business email compromise. Its key difference is moving beyond just known bad signatures to understand normal behavior and spot the anomalies that signal sophisticated attacks.
And their focus is clearly on larger companies facing these complex threats. They seem to have gained real traction, judging by their customer list, their revenue growth, and that strong investor backing, even in a field with big, established competitors.
Right. And they're actively positioning themselves to address the next waves of challenges, particularly around generative AI being used by attackers.
Okay, so maybe a final thought for our listeners to chew on. Given everything we've discussed, the increasing sophistication of these email attacks, the dual role of AI as both a threat and a defense, what new things should organizations maybe start thinking about for their security strategy that go, beyond just the email inbox itself?
That's a great question. As these lines blur between email, collaboration tools, and identity, where do the next unexpected risks lie? What connections need more scrutiny? Definitely something worth pondering in today's landscape.